Due to technical difficulties, we will not have a new episode of Mike's on Mike this week, but instead we're going to bring back an episode that was very popular. In fact, the most downloaded episode we have done thus far. Our guest was David Miller. He's a philanthropist and also co-founder of Brightway Insurance. And if you've seen it before, you'll enjoy it a second time. If you haven't seen it yet, I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you.
Welcome to Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville. Join 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller. Mike Hightower is with us here in studio, and of course, Mike Tolbert is once again out at the barn, and he's still shoveling stuff from over the holidays. So we hopefully we'll get him back in the studio here in the next couple of weeks. Special guest today, and I should start this out by saying that we're not really related. We say we're related, but we're not really related. But boy, there's no one I would rather be related to than David Miller. David, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
You. David is co-founder, executive chairman of Brightway Insurance, one of the largest property and casualty insurance agencies in the nation. Collaborating to lift up the community is what David strives to do, in addition to serving as Emerald Trail co-chairman. And I want to ask about that. I'm not sure what that is. David also is working with other local leaders on Lift Jacks, an initiative to address poverty in our community. Along with other local leaders, he founded Our Jacks, a nonprofit focused on demanding transparency in city government. He's an active supporter of the United Way, an advocate of the LGBTQ plus community, and serves as senior advisory council for One Jacks. Over the years, David has served on a number of boards, including Leadership Jacksonville, the Chamber, the Civic Council, which you still are on, and the Jewish Community Alliance, where he has been a past president. He also supports the Sandy Miller Metropolitan Institute, which is a program that bears his mother's name, which brings youth from all over the city together to build character and leadership skills. David, nice to have you with us. Thank you.
Great also, to be here with my three friends. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your support of this show. Appreciate that very, very much. Mr. Tolbert, kick it off.
Well, I want to go back and correct something you said. He's no longer the executive chairman of Brightway, as I understand it, because he recently sold Brightway. He's still on the board, I think, and still has some role. But David, tell us about you and your brother founded that in 2008.
Yeah.
What was the secret? What was your secret sauce that made Brightway work like it did, become so successful so quickly?
Yeah, well, first, we still own a significant percentage of the company. Michael and I are still very active in the board and strategic direction, but not operationally day to day. But going back to 2008, the thing that really made the difference was a focus. Unlike other companies that benchmark themselves on other companies, we really looked to benchmark ourselves and base ourselves on a customer experience. That was our North Star. And we recognized that if we were going to reach our potential, every individual associated with our company needed to reach their potential. And it's interesting, as you know, we've been on this life journey together, the three of us, through some of the things you talked about and being members of the community. It's really interesting that idea that works so incredibly well in business without any outside capital, without any outside advertising, be able to create value where no one saw it, happens in the community as well. The same laws that work and that have worked at Brightway to be able to create tremendous value from a business standpoint. That same kind of idea I've found works exactly the same way in a community when you focus on the right things.
Interesting. David, only because you said it to our youth group. Talk about the first agency where you started.
Yeah. So we started at the corner of Lem Turner and Sutel. And if you watch the 11 o'clock news, you know, a lot of times that's on the 11 o'clock news, not for the best things. But I'll tell you, we realized that at our core that people are people. And some of the most wonderful people, great relationships, friendships that had nothing to do with race, had nothing to do with economics, were based on getting to know each other side by side. And, that first office had burglar bars on it. It had a buzzer. It was, it wasn't much to look at, but it showed the power of ideas. People think you've got to have, the shiny this and that, but at the end of the day, it's what's under the hood that counts.
Right.
And better ideas ended up winning the day.
And how many employees were there?
3. And the 3 we had honestly, I don't think
That's
a high
not
school.
you, Daniel and Michael.
It wasn't. No. It started with me and then 3 wonderful human beings who just didn't have much education, but had a lot of heart. And, then Michael within a month came on, and then Daniel. And
so how many employees now? So 3 to what now?
There are about 1,500 or so around the country. We have customers in every state. We have offices in most states, 35 or so. And we, around January last year, we're $1 billion. I think we finished $1.25 billion.
Wow.
Again, with no, none of the things that you would typically think a business needs to grow.
I have to throw in something rather personal. I do business with the Riverside office of Brightway. And every time I call over there, and of course, whoever answers the phone says, "Who's calling, please?" And I say, "It's Mike Miller." I can see them jumping out of their chairs, wondering if I'm that Mike Miller. So I now have to do it. "Hi, this is the other Mike Miller calling in."
How about the new and improved Mike Miller?
I'm not sure about it. I agree with you on that. I'm not sure.
I better use that when I call the Orange Park Brightway. I'll see what that does.
Yeah, just tell me you're the other Mike Miller.
Other Mike Miller. That will really frustrate.
You still won't get the call. They'll say, "We'll give you a call back when we get off the phone."
No, I'm going to tell you, they're awesome. They're awesome.
You guys are kind.
Yep.
No.
Let's jump into some of the issues. One of the things that I really wanted to get into, and Tolbert and I talked about this, and so did Hightower, and that is we're a bunch of old fogies. The 3 of us, we really are. I won't get into what our exact ages are, but I can tell you this, that when Moses called me, I told him I could meet him on the mountain.
And Tolbert was there when they did statehood, so we're getting...
Actually, you don't know this, but Tolbert was the one who wrote the 10 Commandments.
There you go.
Who else would do a speech writing for someone like that?
No, he was lobbying Moses to get out of Egypt.
And you were lobbying the Pharaoh to say, "Let him go." I understand. We got it now.
Well, there was 2 sides to that one.
We
Ask the question.
I will. We've really had our days and our history and our experience with the city and with issues and all these other things. But you seem to represent the new generation of leadership in this community. And I think all of us wonder, who is going to be on that list along with you, or is going to take this city to the next level and get us to where we all really want it to be?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it's going to be, we need everyone. We need the institutional knowledge. We need the wisdom that you guys bring. I think, Mike, you've been involved in city government for 50 years. That kind of background it's priceless. You can't buy it. And the wisdom that you guys have is incredibly important. But you're right. There's always a case of passing the baton in different ways and always developing new people. And I think a lot of it comes back to not starting with what are the right answers, but what are the right questions that we need to be asking. And what does success look like for a city? And if you are very clear, one of the things that's interesting, values, your community values should never change. Your tactics will always change and should always change. People have a problem when they get the two confused. So like our values are, we value individuals in this community. We really value that individuals can reach their individual potential. And that's our North Star. That's how we define success, I think, in Jacksonville. You can go to Los Angeles, you can go to Miami, you can go to Atlanta, you can go to any of these big cities. And you know what you're guaranteed of? That city will not be any different because you're there. You come to Jacksonville, or you grow up in Jacksonville, you come here and you choose to be here. You choose to be here, and this place can and will be different for the people who choose to be here. And that's, when you talk about the flip side to us, our potential and realizing our potential as a city, that's what it is. It's about individuals realizing their potential. And when individuals are doing that, the city's going to realize its potential. Not until.
One of the things that.
So what kind of grade would you give us now, David?
Well, I think
what kind of grade at this point in time?
Well, I like to look forward. And I don't think there's been a more optimistic time in our history than there is right now. And I'll tell you why. I think we've got, for the first time, this coalescence between the mayor and her administration that is asking the right questions. You have the Civic Council, which represents the largest businesses in Jacksonville, the largest employers, right on the same page, really thinking about what's the infrastructure we need, thinking about a 10-year plan, not just a political plan to get elected, but what is the future going to look like for Jacksonville in 10 years? And what are the 4 or so different things that we need to be focusing on? We need to be a destination for families, for graduates, for businesses, and we need to focus on education. We've got to turn it around. We've got to make that a great strength of ours. We have to be a community that welcomes ideas and debate and critical thinking. And that's going to be the core of what helps propel us going forward. Connectiveness is one of the key things that we need to focus on. And now we're doing it and we're being more focused around it. That, along with our some of our most important not-for-profits, the leadership at those institutions is probably better than it's ever been.
Absolutely. One of the things that an old employer of mine used to say, Mike Blaylock, another Mike on Mike, used to say all the time was, what does Jacksonville want to be when it grows up? And I still think we're trying to answer that question of really where do we want to be in 20 years from now? Where do we want to be in 50 years from now? What's this city going to look like?
Yeah. Well, I think it should take on all of it. You know, when there are certain things that should be consistent throughout the city, the ideas that we talked about from a value standpoint. Mm-hmm. But tactically, we have individual communities that are separate and distinct and flavorful. Mm-hmm. You know, a city that's a big strip mall is not desirable to anyone. Right. But a city that's Jacksonville that has these different unique kind of places where people can enjoy, and there are individual communities and richness in those communities, and there's relationships and there's connectivity, not only physical connectivity, and we're thinking about that, things like the Emerald Trail and things like our great JTA that's doing fantastic work on thinking about how we're going to really be connecting different pieces. All of that's really important.
Tell us a little bit about, you talking about the Civic Council, not so much of who they individually are. Help us understand of the cross section of, because I'm familiar with some of them, but I think they're in a new place. You talked about the alignment with this new mayor. Yeah. That's a huge opportunity, and it's a positive. Help us explain to us why you think that is a very positive thing, particularly given the fact of where we want to be for the next couple of years. Well,
I'll tell you, so the Civic Council, the membership's made up of the largest employers, the different university presidents, some of our biggest not-for-profits. There's a cross-section of the people who are really driving the activity in our community. And there was a recognition by Mari Kuriyashi, who heads the Jesse DuPont Fund, and others who recognized we needed to do, and Eric Mann, our current chair, that we needed to do a 10-year plan, a strategic plan, that the role of the Civic Council was not just to respond to things that happen to pop up in the news, which we certainly will do, but to be more proactive and say, you know, who is the one organization that's going to have in their eyes that 10-year horizon? Because typically, you know, mayors are elected for 4 years, and great cities to do great things, they typically take more than 4 years. New mayors have new ideas, and we need to be able to say, keep the focus of the community on these longer term goals and work with our mayors and our city council people and our elected officials to accomplish those goals. Mm-hmm. So that's really the difference. Then what happened, we went from really a chair-led organization to one that's a professionally run organization. And this is very recently bringing in an incredibly high-level CEO, someone who's world caliber, Dennis Whittle, who used to be a senior executive at the World Bank, and has connectivity and it has visibility to communities all over the world, has set up not-for-profits himself, publicly traded companies, and a brilliant thinker. And we're grateful for him, especially because his work is going to be managing to that 10-year plan. And so you'll have chairs of the Civic Council that will come and they will go and they will rotate every couple of years. But rather than the vision changing every couple of years, the vision's real clear. We have our North Star and it's 10 years from now. And it's a community that I was helping describe where there's more focus on education. There's more focus on individuals reaching their personal potential. There is focus on the right kind of infrastructure that creates a level playing field where our entrepreneurs can go and innovate and feel free to create and doesn't pick winners. I think in the past, we tried to artificially pick who the winners are going to be. And we don't need to do that. We have all these great resources in play, probably the best suite of resources of any city in the country right now. Think about that. We've got people wanting to move to Florida. And Jacksonville is the best place to do it. I was talking to Tony Cho, who is a developer at Miami. He's been involved in several $1 billion of redevelopment in Miami, and he's blown away in Jacksonville. And he's working on a project right next to East Side, which you mentioned, Lift Jacks, is in the Phoenix Art District, which is going to be a complete redevelopment of that area over something like an 8-acre type parcel that's going to connect East Side to Springfield. And that's the whole point of this. Rather than having little pockets of success here or there, the key is connecting all of the success that we're seeing, all the development that's going on, and it is going on, and working together and collaboratively.
Mr. Tolbert?
Well, David Miller, help Mike Miller understand the connectivity associated with the Emerald Trail. He seemed like to know what the Emerald Trail is, and I don't understand how that could possibly be. But would you explain to him about that?
Boy, I didn't see that train coming at all. That just ran over me, I'll tell you.
I was strong suspicion.
It's only because Miller can't spell emerald.
That's exactly right. I thought you were talking about their chef, Emerald Lagasse.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to have a trail here in Jacksonville. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it was one of those things. And I'll tell you, Brian Wolfberg and I, Brian's the CEO of Vystar, it was very early on, we said, this is fantastic. It's rare that you have a project that is like a win-win-win on every level. Typically, it's good for some, it's not so good for others. It's a mixed bag. This was 100%. It's just fantastic. And that's why the community's rallied behind it so much. Yes, it's good for resiliency. Yes, it's good for connecting different communities. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's good for accentuating our river and connecting the different communities that it's going to touch all through the urban core, San Marco, Riverside, Brooklyn, Springfield, all of that. But it's going to be an amenity that our local entrepreneurs are going to be able to develop around, just like the river. We're actually, there are communities around the country that have actually dug rivers to then build upon them.
Right.
We are creating a new amenity that is going to bring people together for connectivity, for social events, for dining and our and those kind of things. And that's what Jacksonville's future is. It's what the Jaguars are working on. It's what our local developers are working on. And it's what we're seeing people really want. They want that connectivity. Coming out of COVID, we recognized that rubbing elbows with people, that's where the good stuff happens. Right. It doesn't happen on our phones.
Well, how do we get, and let's use the Emerald Trail as an example. How do we get that to become part of the DNA of Jacksonville? Because right now, other than our friend Mark Woods, who will take it on whenever he can to talk about any advancements that are made in the Emerald Trail, I don't see our television outlets doing much on that. I don't hear our politicians talking about it, including, by the way, those city council members whose districts are going to be part of that Emerald Trail and should be well invested into it. It's just not on the tip of our lips like it should be, or on the tip of our tongue as it should be, where everybody knows what we're talking about. Do a poll right now and ask the people of Jacksonville, what do you think about the Emerald Trail? And how many of them are going to say, what is that first?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I tend to think more people are familiar than you might think.
I hope so.
But I think it's a fair question. And it's important. This right here is what's critical for Jacksonville. We have to have these conversations. We have to talk about ideas. And when you're doing that, the best ideas will rise to the top. It's when things happen in the darkness that we know bad things happen. Yeah. And, when I think about our friendship and I think about how we got to know each other, it was how we sort of joined hands, so to speak, when we saw things that just weren't right. And we didn't know exactly what we needed to do, but we recognized that our voice was the tool that we needed to use. And being silent is not a way to empower people to feel like this is their city. And that's what I think is really so special about this place, is that, you're one person away from making a difference in Jacksonville. That is really amazing. We're an NFL city, yet we're a place that's small enough that any individual can really get involved, can really make a difference. And we're becoming much more transparent. We're creating these different opportunities through not-for-profits, tremendous number of young professionals. The ones that I met through the Hightower Fellowship are great examples. Just amazing energy, enthusiasm, competence, and a lot more moving here every day.
And I've said this to Hightower a number of times, because his leadership with emerging leaders, which is part of the chamber, that's really, to me, that's like the minor leagues of these players that are going to eventually make it to the majors, and they will be the ones that are going to be sitting in this chair along with you, telling us what we need to be doing and what we're going to be doing about this city to make it.
I will tell you, David was, we're fixing Friday night. We graduate class 7. Yeah. So because there was 1 year when there was 18, after this, there'll be 120 emerging leaders, all under the age of 41, who are looking to people like David Miller. Yep. Or, folks like Mari or other people that are taking their life's journeys, lessons learned. When David was there, he was unbelievable. There was no question he didn't answer. It was unbelievable. And they walked away with something that they would have never had the chance to do, which underscores what David just said. I think is one of the really things that makes Jacksonville unique. There in this city, as opposed to an Orlando or a Miami, or pick whatever you want, you can still have young people that will have the opportunity to have access to people like David Miller or to some of these other folks like David Mann or whoever that can sit for a couple hours and have that kind of a conversation. And I would think both the guest speaker and that emerging leader walked away with something special. Would you not agree?
You always look. I benefited more than they did, and it's striking to me when you put yourself out there and you just say, and I did with this group. I tried something different, and I said, I'll make a deal with you guys, and I said, I'll be vulnerable if you're vulnerable, And I think people were taken back, because typically when you talk to groups, you have someone who just says stuff and you kind of, okay, that sounds good. And, a few days later, you don't remember much of it. But I think, it's interesting when we just recognize what's important, that, what we've done isn't really important. It doesn't matter. I'm not important. What is important is to each individual, what really matters to them. And so, when it was funny, you started out with a question prompt and something about what was the most important piece of change that everyone's done. Uh-huh. And I went around and I asked everyone, I said, all right, so I'm going to ask you, do you remember what everyone said about all the things that they did that were so fantastic? And they said, Yeah, not so much. And this is their class. And it was honest. And I go, you know why? Because no one cares. They don't care about what you're doing necessarily. They care about reaching their own potential. And the more that we're aligned around thinking about how we get people working together so every individual can reach their own potential, that's where great stuff happens. And so our role is developing people. It's not doing it for them, but it's being honest. It's developing strong leaders, which is not always comfortable. It's making people feel uncomfortable. We're a city of survivors, not a city of victims. And the sooner we recognize that, the sooner we'll be realizing our potential.
That is profound.
Yeah, it is. Let's get into some issues. First of all, I know you're a big cheerleader of the fourth floor on the left side, where is the mayor. Tell us how you think she's doing.
I like the left, the right. I'm kind of in the middle myself. Okay. I've supported every mayor.
Yep.
And I've worked with them.
I'm at the left side of the fourth floor, by the way.
No. But I guess my point is that we should all support our mayor, because at the end of the day, there's an election and then there's someone who's doing the job. And if we want to reach our potential as a city, we've got to support whoever's in that seat. Now, realize that doesn't mean blind support. That doesn't mean they say something and I follow. That means being there. That means debating. It means speaking up when you need to speak up to help them do the things that need to be done. But democracy's an active sport. It's not an armchair sport.
It's a contact sport.
Well, and I'll tell you, there are a few things that I think are really unique and special about our mayor. I think number one, I think she's a tremendous communicator.
No question.
And I sometimes you need someone to interpret. I don't think you need anyone to interpret what she's saying. She speaks from her heart. And I believe, with my relationship with her, I believe she's doing this because she truly loves our city. She doesn't have anything necessarily to prove. She, has battled cancer. She's got one kidney, and, she runs marathons. And, recently, I was able to talk to her after her last meeting at about 11 p.m. one night, and she gets up at like 4 a.m. And so, she's a super hardworking individual. She's doing it for the right reasons. And I think, personnel is a really an interesting thing. I think the goal is to have the best people in every seat all the time. That's your vision. Your vision is to have the best people. Tactically, that's going to change.
Yep. David, along those same lines, talking about leadership, the thing that strikes me about her, there are two things that come out: transparency and authenticity. Would you agree?
100%. Yeah,
which is what, and just to pick up on John Payton, former mayor, used to say after this election, he said, you know what? She's our city CEO. If we're going to go forward, we need to follow her.
Yep.
Period, paragraph. He made it real clear. But the two here, transparency and authenticity.
Yeah, and you know something, look, she is incredibly strong, but I'll tell you, when you make a really good argument for something, she's willing to listen. And I respect people who are able to be vulnerable enough to recognize that, you know what, I have a perspective, but if you have a better one, I'm willing to change.
Yeah.
And that's what we need in that kind of temperament is the kind of leadership that we need as we're going to evolve and become our best city.
Mr. Tolbert, I hear your dog barking.
I want to I know it. I kind of want to go back to where we started this about leadership, David. Mike Hightower and I have had this discussion since the mid-'90s about the current crop of leaders and who's going to follow, who's going to step into their shoes when the time has come. One of my observations, one of my theories is that most often the community leaders have been people who grew up here, who have invested money in the community, whose families have, and then they inherit that and they move on to the positions of community leadership. We're now a different city. We're a city now where people are moving in here by the scores, a lot of smart, inventive, creative people. How do we get them? how do we open the doors for them to become part of the community leadership, to take advantage of that? And I'm going to make one more observation. It's my theory, my feeling, watching this over the last 50 years, that in earlier years, there was a time when the community leaders necessarily didn't want to invite new blood in. And I'm hoping that that's no longer the case. I'd like to hear what you think.
Well, I'll start with the last comment first. I think that it, as you said, it must change, and it is changing. And I look at people like the CEO of Vystar, Brian Wolfberg. He's been here now for a handful of years, and in 5 years has done more for Vystar than, the preceding decades that they've had. The company was still the same, but under new vision and new leadership, they've been able to turn something that was, doing fine to something that has really been transformative in our city, that has become prominent downtown. Brian, as an individual, has been on many boards and has been involved in personally, as a human leader, as a cultural leader, and as a business leader. I mean, he's a perfect example of one of those folks. And I think the key is it's not an or, it's an and. And I think we need everyone. And the key is for people to play their most authentic role, and that's congruent with who they are. If we're at a place where we figure out, and everyone's thinking about things through the right lens, what's the best way for me to engage that's going to be able to make the best difference for me, but also, more importantly, for the community as a whole. And I think that's the big difference. In the past, people looked at the community as a way to benefit themselves, period. And I think now there's a sense that, rising tide will lift all ships. And so that investment in the common good, in the right kind of infrastructure, will end up making a community that we're proud of. That will be Jacksonville reaching its potential. It's a place not where we have some of the richest people, period, but where we have a place where people have they come here because of the ideas that we champion, and that they've got an opportunity here to really make a difference. It's always been the American dream.
Okay, we have to get personal here because I'm looking at the time, but I can't let this show go without bringing up the issue of anti-Semitism. This is very personal, of course, for both David and I. David, you have been tremendously generous in trying to help fight anti-Semitism. I won't get into numbers, but there is a foundation that you founded with your family, with the Miller families, to match funds with organizations that are putting together programs to fight anti-Semitism. And congratulations and thank you for that.
And thank you. You and Monique.
What do we do about it? When we had Adam Chaskin on and Eric Mann on, and I listened to that program again just yesterday while I was out walking. And the one thing that struck me about that conversation was the letter that Adam talked about from the mother who wouldn't let her son attend a class where they were going to be talking about the Holocaust, and she was a Holocaust denier, and she said this is all made up and it's all left-wing propaganda. And as he was talking about that, and as I was listening to it yesterday, the thought was, my God, another child is going to be raised with this philosophy and this thinking and wrong thinking. How do we get to that kid if not being able to go into a classroom and hear from a Holocaust survivor of what it took to get through that? If you won't let them listen to it, then how do we get anyone who's involved in that part of this community, as small but vocal as they are, how do we get them to listen? How do we turn this around? We cannot stand for this to continue on as what we're beginning to see.
Well, let me just say, I'm a human just like everyone else, and it's been tough for me.
It hurts.
In the sense, it's hit home. In the course of 1 week, 2 weeks ago, both of my kids had overt anti-Semitism, acts of that. And my niece, who is a 7-year-old, same kind of thing at school, where, people are talking about why they don't like Jews and saying, well, we like you, we just don't like Jews kind of thing. Typical 7-year-old, I guess, stuff. But for it all to happen at one time. So I guess, when you're faced with this stuff, there's the human tendency to want to fight back, to want to, you feel angry.
Yep.
You feel hurt. But I'll tell you, it's typically not helpful. It's not helpful to go and want to lob bombs back and do it. What takes courage and takes strength is to be able to stay in your center and stand up for the things you believe. For instance, we've been a tremendous supporter of the African-American community, different communities of all different faiths, because the idea is that bias of all kinds is not helpful. It's just not helpful. We're asking the wrong question. The idea of who do we vote off the island? We're not voting anyone off the island. This is America. We're all here. The question is, how do we, instead of identify who are good and bad people, how do we help people be better people? How do we help people feel more secure, feel more safe, feel more connected, feel more optimistic about their future? And the hard thing to do is when you're faced with this stuff, it's easy to feel like you're a victim. And I think at different times, we all feel like a victim. But something, at the end of the day, we're not victims. We are survivors. We are strong. We are capable. And this is our city. And we're going to stand up and we're going to make sure that it continues to be the city we're proud of. And we're going to do it together, because there are a lot more people who want a safe and secure and a warm place for their kids than there are who want to fly banners over the stadium, right, and want to have shootings and kill innocent people at Family Dollars. I mean, it's all symptoms of the same thing. And what I think is challenging is when we try to say it's someone else's fault, or someone else is the problem.
Always using a scapegoat.
Oh, right.
Always,
and it's just, and I think this is where, it's interesting. I'll draw another parallel between business and community. In 2008 and 2009, you remember the Great Recession,
right?
The worst economy ever. It was the best time in the world to start a new company.
I was going to say, you certainly made lemonade out of that lemon.
No one saw it. But I'll tell you, when there's adversity, people are open to change. If everyone's comfortable, they don't want to leave their job. Things are fine. They're good enough. But you know what? People recognize now that what's the status quo and what that is not good. It doesn't make us feel good. Being divisive, being angry, constantly, the amount of time that our anxiety is up because of what we see on social media or on the news. It's almost as though it's designed to trigger us. And we should not be victims of that. We don't have to be victims of that. And so anyways, I think it's really important for us to focus on the flip side of how we survive, how we thrive, and how we do it together.
Okay. We're running out of time here. Mr. Tolbert, do you have a final question you'd like to ask or comment?
No, I don't, Mike. I'd just like to say, Mike Miller, thank you for asking that question. And David Miller, thank you and bless you for answering it.
Yeah, David, it's incredible. I'm thinking of a phrase that I heard that just sort of sums it up about you can't react in a negative way, and it is, how does it help to answer rudeness with rudeness? How does it help to answer bigotry with bigotry or meanness with meanness? You can't do it. Yep. And that's where the courage of people like you all and a lot of people, we've got to stand up and say it's wrong and reach out to other people. But thanks for everything you're doing, but thanks for being here. Thanks for what you and your family do every day for us.
Right back at all of you. We need each other in this. So I'm grateful to be here.
Come back and see us again.
Sounds like a winner.
All right. Thanks. That's going to do it for another episode of Mike's on Mike. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, you can find us on Facebook, on our website, mikesonmike.com. You can find us on Spotify, on iPod and podcasts, or anywhere you get your favorite podcasts.
Or you can see us at the post office on the wall. That's true.
And we're starting with merchandise, folks. Look at that.
Not exactly a jukey moment, but it's okay.
Also want to take the opportunity to again thank Alan Bliss and our friends over at the Jacksonville History Center and the Historical Society for their support of Mike's on Mike. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for joining us. And once again, Happy New Year, everyone.
Good to see y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and Mike Miller can be found at your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook and YouTube. Learn more at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversations with Mike's on Mike.